Hi, everybody, and happy Veterans Day. You know what? My heart is so in this show today. I am going to just share a little bit about my favorite veteran, and it was my uncle. So basically, he was a great uncle, but he's my favorite veteran just because of something that he did for me when I was very young. Um, I was sitting in the back of the car and the exhaust started to back up into the car. Before I knew it, I was out and I was slipping away. And when I woke up, I awoke to him breathing air into my body. And I was only I had to be less than 8 years old, but I still remember it. My uncle was in um, the war and he fought for our country and he did not come back the same. I want to be honest. He did not come back the same, but he was a very, very beautiful and gentle man and he saved my life. So that is why he is my favorite veteran. I hope you did something to honor a veteran today. But enough about me and my story. I have for you today Mr. Aaron Witt. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you? How are you, Coach Love?
I'm doing amazing. I'm doing
Good.
amazing. I'm pretty excited about today's subject matter. Real quick, because you have two favorite vets. I'm gonna throw up this picture. Check it out for me. Tell me about those guys in the photo.
Yeah. So the first picture, that's my dad. My dad, he did 21 years in the Army. He retired in 1993, I want to say. And my son, my oldest son, who came on kind of late at the last podcast, if you guys kind of remember, he was on guard, so he couldn't get on in time. Travis, he's currently serving in the military at Fort Bliss in El Paso. And he currently just reenlisted for another 4 years. So I want to say shout out to my pops, George Witt, and to my son Travis. And I want to, and to the rest of the veterans, I want to say happy Veterans Day and thank you all for your service and much gratitude. Much
Yes,
gratitude.
yes, yes. Freedom is not free. Freedom is not free.
Yeah.
You know what? And you kind of serve the veteran population in a special way, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So, working on the behavioral health unit, that's the new terminology that we would call, the psychiatric ward at the hospital. Being in the greater St. Louis area, over here on the Illinois side, up towards, Shiloh and Swansea and all of that. I When I worked at Touche Hospital in Centerville, and then when I worked at SSM St. Mary's in Centralia on the behavioral health units. We would serve the Air Force population that would, sometimes have difficulties with some PTSD or depression, and I would do therapy, inpatient therapy with them, and assessments with them, and we would try to connect them with services once they were discharged from the hospital on the behavioral health unit or psychiatric ward as many people formerly know it as. And so, yeah, it was an honor and a privilege. A lot of homeless veterans,
Hmm.
a lot of veterans who have been suffering and just been find it hard to get the mental health help that they need. We would be kind of their first step into that process with getting the help that they needed. So.
Hmm. I'm going to step you back because you know these guys love you. They want to know about your dad. They're asking you a question about your dad. Is your dad still alive?
Yeah, my dad's alive, man. He's in Birmingham, and he's retired, and what he's doing now is he works as a volunteer with the veterans and the Veterans Administration down there. So he kind of helps them would get their disability. He goes and he does some counseling there. He also helps with substance use and things like of that nature down there. So yeah, man, he's alive and well. Like I said, once again, shout out to my pops, George Witt Jr., George
Hmm.
Aaron Witt Jr. Shout out to my pops, and yeah, so he's still alive, and he's alive and well, man, and he's still serving even after he's retired. He's still serving. So
So, you know what? Earlier, you told me that the reason why your dad serves in the way that he serves right now is because he's seen so many guys not get what they need. Tell me what you meant by that.
So, when we talk about the veterans and, a lot of the paperwork that's involved with, the VA administration and, those veterans who have served and those who are just unaware of how to get disability, how to unaware of how to get help. He's been able to kind of liaison that process for them. And what he does is he gets the paperwork started for some of their disability. He helps them and points them in the right direction as far as getting mental health help, getting
Mhm.
substance abuse help, and things of that nature. And I think that that's very important because at some point we've had issues in this great country of ours with some of the veterans, getting help, and even to this day, it's such a rigorous paperwork process that it almost makes it unattractive to even want to get help because it kind of seems like we bounce these guys around to different places and different facilities, and there's so many loopholes involved in that if without the proper support or without the proper people on your side, without the right people on your side, it's kind of hard to figure out how to get the services that they need from the Veterans Administration. And
So let's
so,
let's let's get down to it because earlier we were talking, getting ready
uh,
for this call, and you being so sweet now, but you was actually mad. You were like, they don't have what they need.
yeah, yeah, because it is, it sometimes it's a disservice, and I don't want to point the finger specifically at anyone, but I mean, let's face it, we know in this country that there's been a lot of issues when it comes to mental health and when it comes to the veterans getting what they need.
You serious
And
about this?
yeah, very serious about it, because I've seen it firsthand. I've seen young men, who've come in, young men and women who serve currently this country, who's come
Hmm.
into the facilities, and it's hell trying to once you're military and you're trying to get set up with aftercare appointments for psychiatry and stuff like that. It's so many loopholes. And what I used to do on the psychiatric ward there is when people come in, I do assessments, I do therapy with them, I do group with them, and most of the times during a one-on-one therapy, you know, I would also double as a social worker, right? Because
Hmm.
most of the times when you're a therapist and you're working inpatient, a lot of times we have to set them up with aftercare services. And so
Okay.
what we would do is we wouldn't discharge anyone until they had aftercare services. But you have to understand, when it comes to getting the proper treatment, mental health treatment, insurance plays a big role in this. And so a lot of the military population who may have what is it, TRICARE,
Right.
some of it it's kind of hard for them to for them to get services, civilian services, and because on most posts, when they're trying to get mental health help, they outsource to most of the hospitals outside of post, most of the civilian hospitals. So once
Hmm.
they do that and they go to the ER, the emergency room in most of the hospitals, then they end up, if that hospital doesn't have a behavior health unit or a psychiatric ward, what they'll do is they'll send them, to another hospital. They have an intake process. So,
Okay.
intake would, field the calls to let different places who have those who may have beds available. They'll let them know that we have they'll talk about the patient and what's going on with them. And most of the times they'll end up, in a hospital in the area, and it could be within a 100, 200-mile radius at times. And so once they get to us, we would be tasked with trying to make sure that they are set up with the proper help that they need once they leave us. Because we all know that mental health, once it starts somewhere, we have to create a pipeline for them to get a continuous care. And so once they leave us, some places, from the veterans that for the active duty,
Mm-hmm.
it's so many loopholes with the insurance and trying to set them up with counseling, because some of these places might not take insurance, some of these places might not take some of the counseling places might not take insurance, some of the psychiatrists might not take insurance, and a lot of times you can't see a psychiatrist until you have a primary care doctor. So if you're dealing with these doctors on the military bases and the military posts, but then they end up outsourcing you to a hospital, then they're kind of stuck there trying to figure out what the next move is. And so it's a vicious cycle to where, once we release them and back to their commanders or whatever, and we're not able to find them the proper help that they need, then the cycle starts all over again. And for those homeless veterans, a lot of times when they come in, this is where my dad would usually come into play at. A lot of the veterans that, are trying to get substance use treatment, they also have TRICARE, and a lot of civilian places don't take that. And so they have to sit up and wait for beds at the VA. And what do you do while you're sitting waiting on a bed that might take a month or 2 months to get, especially and it could be longer than that, especially if you do not have the proper support system or the proper resources, then it's going to be very difficult to even get some of the homeless veterans or some of the ones who served previously services. So I found it disheartening, and I found and of course earlier I got upset because when I was talking with you, I was saying,
actually, I love it. I love, one thing about you, Aaron, I love your passion. And I think that is what has made the difference for you, is that when you get your teeth into something, you are determined to make
absolutely,
it work. At the end of the day,
yes.
it is going to work. What do we got to do to make this happen? And so I love the
Because
fact
this is all I have. This is all I have. And this is my baby. When we talk about mental health and mental health awareness, a lot of people, they say it and make it a cliche, but this thing has been going on for years. This thing has been going on for years.
So I want to talk about some of the things that people do not necessarily, we think mental health, right? But we don't
Mhm.
think PTSD is the reason why a family might be getting a divorce, or
Yeah,
getting separated.
yeah.
Or
Mhm.
PTSD might be the reason why there is domestic violence in the
Yes.
home. PTSD might be the reason why someone cannot keep a job. It's because
Mhm.
they're living in a traumatized cycle. Heck,
Yeah.
PTSD might be the reason why somebody's having a meltdown over
Yeah.
something absolutely minor, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
And seemingly minor, because what I used to tell people who would come see me, there are no big I's and little U's, right? Because
mhm,
it's something, when trauma has no timeline. And
mhm,
what's big to someone and what's small to someone, if someone has an ant farm and they're so, depressed and traumatized over one of their ants dying out of 1,000 ants, that doesn't mean that you get a chance to say, hey, what's wrong with you? It's nothing but an ant farm. One of your ants died, because you don't understand what's going on in that person's head. Just like PTSD, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's something that also is not just military. When you talk about a lot of these kids that grow up in urban areas and low socioeconomic status areas like myself, we
mhm,
usually grow up with a bout of PTSD that we don't even understand that what's going on with ourselves, because you're
mhm.
in an environment, you're damn near in a war zone, especially when you grow up, and so dysfunction, like I said, like I always say, becomes function. So you don't really understand that what's going on at the time is something that later on in life, once you find out, like, hey, you know, that wasn't right, looking back on it, and you went through these years and you've had bouts of depression, bouts of anxiety, and you don't even know where they come from and you can't identify it. Now a light bulb gets to come on because we brought so much awareness to this mental health stuff. But where do we get the help from, especially in Black communities where we don't feel like, mental health is a thing, right? So there are certain cultures that like our culture that we don't look at mental health as it's a thing. I was just watching something about some of these young rappers who they're always carrying guns or going to jail, and it seems like a vicious cycle. And people misunderstand these kids because growing up in these neighborhoods, that's a war zone in itself as well. And so a lot of the population don't understand, and they judge and they talk about well, why this kid has a gun, or why this person does this and why this person does that. And we wonder why growing up in those areas that almost like going to jail is a rite of passage. I could sit up and be talking to a couple of my homeboys, when I decide to go down to my neighborhood, and the first thing they'll say is, you ain't been to jail, or you ain't did that no time. Like, that's a rite of passage. And what we have to understand is that when we're traumatized and we grow up in these environments, where's the help? Where's the help? I've seen it firsthand from working in different environments, from working in mostly white rural communities to mostly Black urban communities, to where the first thing that happens in the Black community, if you have somebody that's suffering from mental health illness, and the police come, or they're taking you behind the jail. A lot of times you don't get a chance to get the mental health help you need because we turn everything that's done into a criminal act. And on the contrary, working in some of these rural white communities, I've seen reports, and dealt with patients that's come in and they've had, high speed chases, and they pull guns out and put guns to their head and threaten to kill themselves and threaten to kill the police. And then they'll end up involuntary on a psych ward. And it's like, wow, how disenfranchised is it that the people in these low SES areas, they don't get a chance to plead their case because they might have some acute distress going on, or they may be suffering from something that has got their mental health off. But the first thing we want to do is give them jail time and lock them up, and I don't think that's fair. And I've seen it all the way across the board. And so when we talk about PTSD, it's not just in the military. It's in the military. It's in these low socioeconomic status neighborhoods. I mean, it's also in some white rural neighborhoods. I'm just saying that the way that these things are treated is different, and we have to figure out a better way to funnel these people who have these mental health disorders through the pipeline. We have to do a better job at awareness, getting these people help, and making sure that they follow up with their appointments once we do make those appointments for them, and their discharge from the psychiatric ward or from the behavioral health unit.
So let me say this. I honestly think right now, when I say all of America is going through PTSD. And I'm gonna tell you,
Yes.
yes. There was a lady, and she was served hot soup. Soup is supposed to be hot, okay?
Yeah.
And so, and some people might be familiar with this story. She was served hot soup, but the soup was too hot. It was so hot that it melted the top, okay?
Mm-hmm.
She called and she was yelling at the lady at the store. Then she physically came up to the store and was complaining about the soup. The manager asked her, do you want some more soup? Can I get you something else? Instead of responding like a normal person, this woman physically tossed the soup on her in her face. Family, you guys can go look this up. And so, to me, having your soup too hot is a small thing. That is not something that should cause that level of aggression. Now, she
Well,
must.
we got to be careful when we use those words, when we use that language. Should
Well,
those absolutes, because
teach me what language to use. But I'm just going to tell this is definitely, in my opinion, watching this. I'm saying this person must be suffering. She she has
Yeah.
to be suffering from something internally
And
for
it
to have
happens. It happens.
that.
What that looks like to me is burnout, right? And so what happens is when we're in a helping profession and we talk about when we talk about helping people and we're helpers, if we're in a profession, we're helpers naturally. Like, this is something that I pride myself on doing. This is something that I feel like it's my purpose in life. And so there are times and days where, when I would go to work and I would have to will myself to talk with patients because hell, I had things going on too. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with depression and I've dealt with PTSD, and so these are some of the things on the forefront that when we're dealing with, it's not fair to counter transfer some of that energy on other people, but we also have to hold others accountable, around us because, they should know what it looks like. If I'm going to work every day and I'm working all of these hours and because we're short staffed and I'm willing to work, then someone ought to say, hey, Aaron, wait a minute, no, it's okay. We'll try to figure this thing out because next thing you know, I can try to pick up these all of these shifts. Excuse me.
Bless
I can
you.
try to thank you. I can try to pick up all of these shifts, and out of the from the bottom of my heart and out of the kindness of my heart, and be it that I feel like I'm a battery charger, right? So I always tell people, no, don't worry about asking me for help because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the battery charger. If you're the phone and you need charging, just sit yourself on me because I was blessed to be able to be in a position like that. But we also have to recognize and understand what burnout means in mental health. And I think a lot of times, from talking to a lot of military veterans and a lot of people in my neighborhood and low socioeconomic status neighborhoods, and just a lot of people who were dealing with mental health in general. A lot of times, when you're dealing with burnout, some of these jobs can say, yeah, yeah, take your mental health day. But as soon as you take a mental health day and they're short staffed, then it's a problem. So I think we just need to do a genuinely better job at making sure that the people that are in these helping professions that we hold that they're held accountable, that we hold those people around us who are higher in authority accountable when it comes to us making sure that we get the proper rest and relaxation that we need. One of my favorite quotes is, "You don't have to work every day, all day to be successful. Rest, recovery, and relaxation is also a part plays a vital part in in your mental health when it comes to being successful." So,
Okay, I love that. This is what I'm looking for from you because
mhm,
all of us are not, therapists like you. We haven't gone to
okay,
school, but we are walking, talking, sponges for one another. We're receiving one another's energy all the time.
yeah, and
Okay.
it's more than school too. One of my doctors, Dr. Gorky, he used to always tell me, Aaron, make sure you have empathy over intelligence because you can learn all of these things in school. But if you can't empathize with the people the population that you're dealing with, in order to get the proper information from them, in order to be, break the ice with them, in order to break the monotony with them, so that they can, give everything to you that you need to help them. If you can't get the things that you need to help them, how can you help them? It don't matter how much information or knowledge that you gain. You have to have those skills to where they genuinely understand that you're there trying to help them.
So I agree with you, and that's where I'm going with this. I am
Mhm.
wanting you to help us as lay people be equipped because I promise you, everybody watching is trying to navigate the maze of the high frustration level that
Mhm.
is, in the atmosphere. All right.
Yes.
How do we diffuse a situation that we see that's ratcheting up? I'm looking for that. And then how do we recognize in our own self when we might have sadness, but it's coming out as anger. I'm really noticing that. As a matter of fact, can you hit that one first? How can someone who is having sadness pop out as aggression and anger? How can they help themselves? How can they be redirected?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of times, and that's one of my top skill sets. You know, a lot of times when we have people who have displaced anger, you have to help them to understand that that's what's happening. Okay, because a lot of times when people have displaced emotions, and they're really sad, but it pops off as anger, you have
Mm-hmm.
to sit down with them and help them to understand what's going on. And more times often than not, if you can't understand the physiological part of it, then it won't it, you know it won't help. So helping them to receive this information, by starting with physiological. I know that it sounds cliche when we say breathing techniques, or just counting and stuff like that. But those are things that really work, and I'm gonna tell you why they really work. Because a lot of times, if you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, then you're
Okay.
not thinking rationally, right? Okay, so think about
Oh,
boxers.
wait. Does alcohol prevent oxygen from getting to your brain?
Alcohol doesn't prevent oxygen from getting to your brain, but it distorts the brain, and it causes the
Okay.
brain to think that one thing is going on when actually something else is going on. So that's when people get drunk and feel like they can drive, or people get drunk and feel like they can just beat up the whole bar and club, but they're stumbling over. That's a whole nother thing. But what I'm talking
Okay.
about is anger.
Okay.
Um, and so when we talk about displaced anger for people who are sad, and they're displacing, and they're replacing their anger, their sadness with anger.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So these are things that you start with the elementary things, which is physiological. A lot of times, when we have to understand that they're both intertwined. Physical ailment and well, physical illness and mental illness are intertwined, whether
Mhm.
we want to believe so or not. Think about a boxer. If a boxer goes into a ring mad and upset, they're probably gonna lose. More times often than not, it's not personal. But if you're mad, think about it. You're not even breathing. You're panting. Every few moments you're taking deep breaths. So you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain to think rationally. And
Okay.
once you continue to do that, things start to ruminate. And
Mhm.
so once things start to ruminate in your head, then the sadness, once it's the same with anxiety, because anxiety can turn into that. People who have anxiety, they're oh boy, they're pacing back and forth. Oh boy, they're pacing. And so their thoughts are not rational, because that's what anxiety is. All anxiety is it's creating false narratives in your head that
Mhm.
makes you think that this is something that it is, when it really isn't. And so things like, early prevention techniques, those are
Mhm.
things that happen to the most, because most of the times when I was working in crisis, I used to tell a lot of people this. Once you get here to the crisis unit, I can tell you all day what to work on here, because now you're here. But when you're dealing with some depression or anger issues, or PTSD, or any mental health issues, you have to take precautionary measures on a daily basis. That way, once you get a chance, once you do find yourself in a crisis situation, you can kind of rationalize what's going on, because you'll know the signs, right? Like for myself, I know if I get upset, I might start rocking back and forth and playing with my hand. So I know if I'm doing that, something's wrong. All right, so
Okay.
I stop right there and I breathe. Okay.
Mhm.
I know if I'm doing it and I'm upset, if I get a text message and it's like, and it tees me off, because that's a whole nother thing in itself. When we talk about social media and depression and PTSD, a lot of times these messages come across, and they might not even be the way we perceive them to be. I mean, they no, no, no. They
Mhm.
might not even be what we
Ooh.
what we think they are, but we perceive them to be something different. So I
Right.
tell people, before you send a message back, because a lot of times, we'll read a message wrong and we be ready to go in.
Mhm.
Type the message and let it sit there. and come back 20 or 30 minutes later. And I guarantee once you reread it, you'll probably laugh and be like, I'm not sending this crap
Because
because
they're
you give it.
social media soldiers. I promise you that they
Yeah, yeah,
social media
yeah,
soldiers.
yeah. This is golden information because we have to take control. We have to take back control of stuff like that. Stuff like
Mm-hmm.
social media and reacting to people because sometimes when you react the wrong way, all you do is put it's like pouring gasoline
Mm-hmm.
in the fire. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times when we're dealing with different issues, and what good does that do? What good does that do when it doesn't do anything but have you in a power struggle with someone going back and forth, and now you're compounding negative energy, negative thoughts. You're compounding all of this stuff, and the human brain we have on average 77,000 thoughts a day, and 75% of those thoughts are negative. And I mean thoughts
What?
like
Wait, freeze.
hmm,
What percentage of our thoughts are negative?
75% of our thoughts are negative.
What?
Between 75 and 77. Because think about it. We will ourselves most of the times into negative situations. Oh man, how am I gonna pay this bill? Oh, this bill ain't gonna never get paid, or I gotta do this. And we everything like, man, what is that? Is that a ceiling fan? What's that on the ground? Our thoughts. We just have thoughts, right? And most of the time, and what is that fueled by? When we turn on the news, most of the time in the news we see negative information because that captures our attention, right? Most of
Uh-huh.
the time on social media, we want to see something that's kind of ratchet, or we want to see something that'll catch our eye, but it might be at somebody else's expense. And so these are
Ooh.
the things that we look at and we gravitate toward. So we're not really putting the positive energy into the atmosphere that we need in order to reciprocate positive energy.
Well, can we train ourselves to focus on the good? Can
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Meditation and counting and journaling and breathing techniques, these are the things. That's what I say, early prevention. You don't wait until you're in a crisis situation to deal with a crisis situation because by that time it's a crisis situation. And
Okay.
so think of it in this aspect. And I know a lot of people watch sports, so think of it as we think that things can happen overnight, right? Especially if something happens and we feel like, okay, well, I can get past this, I can fix this. But if you haven't put in the work, it's going to be difficult. We'll
Mm-hmm.
we'll turn on the TV on Sunday and we'll watch a football game and we'll be like, whoa, that boy caught the ball with one hand, or they getting down. You see that game, a 2 hour, 3 hour game, but what you don't understand is they practice 40 hours a week for a 2 hour game. An NBA player might shoot 1,000 jump shots in a week only to take 40 jump shots in the game. And so we got to do the same thing with life. So when things happen and we feel like we need to perfect something, or we need to work on our mental health, or we need to work on things that would put us in a better position, mentally, emotionally, and when we're searching for that stability, we have to work on ourselves just that much. So when somebody sees us polished, they're like, wow, you're pretty polished. But what they don't understand is all of the work that came into making sure I'm polished. See,
Mm-hmm.
we can look at a game on TV and be like, oh, that boy get down, or that man, that girl, she's so good at what she does. But what we're failing to realize is they practice, and practice all week. So when they show up on game day, do you know what they went through to get there to look that polished? So we have to make sure that we're putting that work in ourselves, and most of all,
I
on
want to
ourselves and for ourselves.
I want to talk about Granny 14. She's Granny 14 because she has 14 grandkids, okay?
Uh-huh.
She told us that last time. But she says that when she gets stressed out or mad or nervous, she shakes.
Shakes her leg. Yeah.
She
Uh-huh.
shakes her legs really
Yeah.
bad. So is that a good technique? Is that a way to point that energy?
Well, it's not a technique. It's a warning sign.
Okay, so
And
that's a
so
warning sign.
yeah, yeah. So that's what I was saying. Once we understand, the things that we do, our body language, 70%, and here we go with numbers again, right? 70% of communication It's nonverbal. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
You don't walk around all day talking to people all day. You don't be in a house with your family and you talk 70. You'd be a chatterbox if you did that. So when you look at people, when I look at my daughters, when I look at my son, and I see certain cues, or like when we had the podcast the other night and I saw my son, I'm like, he's tired. I understand his body language. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I notice other things about my kids, I notice their body language. And so those are things that we have to understand, especially with those loved ones around us and with ourselves. Because if we find ourselves doing certain things, then we should already be able to pick up on those cues and be like, oh boy, something's about to happen. And if you're nervous about something and you notice you're shaking your leg, grade 14, then that's when you stop and you actually slow down and take the time out to breathe. Because before you let those 14 grandkids get on your nerves and you just ready to pull your hair out, at that point it's too late. So once you
I think
find
Greg,
yourself, yeah,
I
once you find yourself, go
I
ahead. I'm
think Greg
sorry.
is about it. Is she?
Yeah,
Don't take
but
no
but, but
stuff.
look, even though she's spotted about it, at growing up, those kids are gonna understand that too, because I
Okay.
know so we know subtle cues. We know when we don't supposed to ask grandma for nothing, and grandma gonna give you a piece of her mind, or we know when we watch our parents, nah, this ain't the right time to ask. So we do that with other people all the time.
Right.
We know the subtle cues, So anytime you find yourself in a situation, that's what I tell anybody who's suffering from depression or who's thinking about committing suicide or anything like that. I always commend those people who reach out for help, and when they would come in and see me and they'd be like, but I feel like a loser because I can't believe I thought about killing myself. And I said, no, you could don't possibly feel like a loser, because what happened is you were able to express that you needed help before you got to that point. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the most important thing about mental health. Make sure that you're able to talk with someone or to reach out to someone. And if you don't have anyone to reach out to, there are hotlines, there are therapy hotlines you can call, and all of this stuff is like my kids always ask me questions. I'll be like, Google it. Don't you like we do everything with our phones, Google it. Google, a free therapy hotline, a suicide hotline, all of those things, because we're in such a and see that's another thing what I was saying. We're social media and we have all of this technology and all this information, but how often do we use it for the good?
Mm-hmm.
We don't really ever think to use it for the good, you know?
To be very honest, I had to share the hotline today with somebody
Yeah.
regarding regarding suicide. I do want to bring that up. If we have a friend
Hmm.
or we are aware of a suicide situation, okay, we give this number, but what's something else we can do? Because, sometimes it's out of our reach. How should we be responding to somebody in trouble?
Well, if the first step is if you know that someone's in trouble and they're suffering from mental health illness, you can call the ambulance and you can call a resource officer, and specifically ask for a resource officer that specializes in dealing with people with mental health, because a lot of times that's a different training, and when you have those officers to come out, they're more patient, they're more kind, and they know the telltale signs. And so once you call the ambulance and you call the law enforcement agency, then they'll route you to the hospital. They'll route you to the emergency room. And once you get to the emergency room, if you've been suffering from, because I have a lot of people who come and say, well, how do I get my brother help? He's schizophrenic, or, if my daughter is talking about killing herself and she has depression, what do I do? And this is the area where a lot of people do not understand that they have this outlet. So when you go to the emergency room, the first thing they're going to do, if you're having any of those signs or symptoms or exacerbation of any mental health symptoms, they're going to call the psychiatric hospital or psychiatric ward, and they're going to have you evaluate. They're going to have an intake person to evaluate you. And so once intake evaluates you, then they talk the people in intake. I've done that. I spent a year at a hospital doing intake. We call and talk to the doctors, and this is 24 hours. And I used to hate calling and waking the doctors up at night, but that's something that must be done, and they understand it because that's their expertise, right? So you call a psychiatrist and you staff that patient with that psychiatrist, and you let them know what's going on. And 9 times out of 10, if they meet criteria, then they're able to come in. Now I know.
What's criteria? What's criteria? Because I think it's very important
Mhm,
that we as lay people understand how to communicate. Listen, the
mhm,
person that I'm connected to right now
yeah,
is, in big trouble. And I know you have to communicate in some kind of way that this person is a danger to themselves or a danger to others.
yeah,
Because just acting weird, a person can act weird without being ready to be put in the hospital.
yeah. So if a person is acting weird, and you say that again, you said if they're acting
For instance,
weird and
what I was trying to say is sometimes you might notice, you might pick up on signs and symptoms that a
uh-huh,
friend or somebody
yeah,
is,
yeah,
they're not acting themselves.
uh-huh,
But from what I understand, you have to clearly communicate that
mm-hmm,
someone is a
yeah,
danger to themselves
cells, uh-huh,
or a danger
or
to
someone
somebody else.
else.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
And
if you
that's
don't
that's only
say,
that's only part that's only part of the criteria, because a lot of times if you have someone with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia and they're having an exacerbation of symptoms, or if they're even in a drug-induced psychosis and they're hearing voices and they're seeing things, um, most of the more times often than not, they'll have a history. And we use the system called Epic, and a lot of times Epic, you can look and see their mental health history, and so you'll know, like, oh, okay, this person has probably not been on their medication. So that's something that you can communicate with the doctor, and by once you assess the patient. And a lot of times people who are suffering from those type of mental health disorders, they're going to come in with someone, right? Because and even if they don't, if they come, well, they're going to come in with someone, because
okay,
more times often than not, they may come in with the police. Somebody might call the police on the street and say, hey, I see this person, acting kind of weird. And then you'll be able to know and understand if they've been making their follow-up appointments or not with their psychiatrist, because it's all in the system. But some of those people who go ahead, what were you
I
going
want
to
to
say?
make this a kitchen table issue. I'm trying to bring it to our homes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're on the couch, you
Uh-huh.
know, you sitting there watching some kind of no, I'm telling you what you're watching. You're watching Tiger King because you didn't catch it over the summer, okay? And then
Okay.
your family member comes through the door. They
Uh-huh.
they cussing, they fussing, um, you know, and they're just being, they're being aggressive, complaining there's nothing in the refrigerator. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. They're just
Mm-hmm.
on you, blah 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 blah. It's constant. It's starting into a rant. By the time 9 o'clock come, they have started cursing at you, tearing you down, and
Mm-hmm.
everything. You are looking at this person having a meltdown. Okay.
Uh-huh.
You can see that maybe they are talking to somebody that's not you. Okay. And that you don't see anywhere, in this household. You call the police. Okay. The police say, well, ma'am, this guy lives here. We can't do anything. What I'm trying to do is equip us lay people with the
Mm-hmm.
proper words to help this situation be turned
Okay.
before it turns into a situation.
Yeah.
So
So
help us
so
get out.
when you have so usually when you have a situation like that, and the police might show up, or the ambulance might show up and say they can't help that person, a lot of times what will end up happening is they have to sign. You could talk to them and let them know that this person is a threat to themselves, and that you feel like they're not deemed fit to take care of themselves at this moment. And so if things like that are happening, what you have to do is end up signing an involuntary form. Okay, so this
Mhm.
is. Let me get back to the pipeline of when it comes to going to the hospital for mental health help. Okay, so um, there's two ways it can go. It can go voluntarily. So if I know I'm having an exacerbation of symptoms and I need my meds and I've run out of medications, I should be able to articulate that. And if I'm not able to articulate that, whoever's there with me can articulate that. And if they can't articulate it, when I talk to the when the intake assessor talks to the doctor, they can articulate that to the doctor and say, hey, I think this person is a good fit. They've been off their medications. They're not they're a danger to themselves. They're having an exacerbation of mental health symptoms, and that's usually one of the words that will help your loved ones get help. Because anytime you're
So
having an exacerbation
exacerbation of
of
mental
mental,
health symptoms.
yes, and that's
That's the
basically
phrase.
you, George.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, you're just basically showing the signs that if you're bipolar and you see someone being very manic, or if you see somebody with schizophrenia and they're talking to themselves, and their tardive dyskinesia might be kicking in, and and they're having responding to internal stimuli, things like that. So basically, it's when people are talking to themselves, you say, hey. I've seen my loved one, responded to internal stimuli. I've seen them, be delusional, having
Mhm.
delusions of grandeur in lieu of religion, because some people might start talking about, their Jesus, or they've seen Jesus and stuff like that. Or you might have some people who are having tactile hallucinations where they feel like things are crawling on their skin and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So those are usually the key words to use in that instance. But when you
And I
have
just want to
somebody,
say, I just want to capture something.
mhm,
The medical terminology for talking to yourself is responding
responding
to
to internal
internal
stimuli,
stimuli.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
I like
so,
that. I like
yeah,
that.
and so more times often than not, when we have people, and some people, they don't want the medication, right? So when they get there
Mm.
involuntarily,
Hmm.
and they say, you can't make me take this medicine. What usually happens is the police or the authorities, they'll end up signing an involuntary petition, or the intake assessor, or a lot of times there are nurses on a psych ward too. If there's not intake assessors, they'll sign an involuntary petition. And what that does is it makes the person, it brings the person in to where they have to go in front of a judge. And so we've had court on many a day. So when you have someone who ends up on the psych ward, and let's not forget, it's a locked door, right? So once you're on there, you can't leave AMA. You can't leave against medical advice as if you were on triage, or if you were on telemetry, or if you were just on a regular floor. You can't leave against medical advice, because once you're on the psych ward, there's a 72 mental health hold, and it's just
Hmm.
like as if you were on an investigation for mental
Hmm.
health. And so once you get there and they refuse medications, then they'll go in front of a judge. And usually the judge will ask sometimes the therapist is there,
Hmm.
and the doctor is present, and the judge will start asking the patient questions. And then, more times often than not, if they're still having an exacerbation of symptoms, which they probably will 9 times out of 10, if you decide to take them to court, the judge can clearly see that this person isn't mentally stable enough to make sound decisions on their own.
Hmm.
So the judge would grant the stay in a mental health hospital, and that person would have to be subjected to taking medication. A lot of times we would give for patients with
Hmm.
schizophrenia, you'll give them Haldol Decanoate, and sometimes that's an injection that might last 30 days. And what happens with that is we didn't use straight jackets or any of that stuff anymore. All that stuff is outdated, but they do have a restraint chair, because we didn't do restraints or holds, but we would have to place them in a restraint chair,
Hmm.
and to get them the medications to make them better. Now, there are some people, if you have depression, that if you're in there and you're voluntary, or if you're in there and somebody makes you involuntary, you'll be hard pressed to take them in front of the judge, because it's like, I'm depressed. I don't want my medication, and I'm not. I was depressed yesterday. Then I'm not depressed today. And sometimes, those are people who are suffering from acute distress disorder. So sometimes when we have those people that come in, and like, me and my girlfriend might have gotten to it, and she's like, I hate you. I just don't want to live right now. And if I hear that and I call the ambulance and say, hey, and if I got somebody else there that says, hey, this person was talking about killing themselves, they still would have to stay there on a 72-hour hold and they wouldn't have to see the judge or not until they at least got better. And we were able to, because anytime you're on a on a behavioral health unit, we do not discharge you to the streets. The good ones don't anyway. Okay.
Okay.
Um, they make sure that you have a primary care appointment, and they also make sure that you have a psychiatry appointment before you leave there. So once you leave there, you have those resources in place. And I tell a lot of people that's what happens. That's what early prevention looks like. So instead of breaking down and having a meltdown or a crisis, a lot of times if you can't get a hold, if you don't want to come to the psych ward and spend those days, then you make sure that you stay in touch with your primary care doctor and your psychiatrist so that you can, or and your counselor, so that you may be able to talk with them and get the proper help that you need. And they'll assist you with things like making a safety plan, making sure that you have support systems in place, a safety net in place. And they'll go over all of those details with you to ensure that if your doctor appointment is a week out, that these are things that they can help you with and give you resources for until you're able to make your doctor appointment. So it's a very tricky situation a lot of times, because you have people that come in there that need help but don't want it. Some people that want help but don't need it. Because we also have some people that come in there, psychosomatic, and it's kind of like, oh my God, this person is, you know, faking seizures. And I'm not saying mental health is fake, but I'm saying when you have the expertise and the knowledge and you've seen it time and time again, you'll know that some people just like to be in the on that unit. Like some people actually just like to be there because they feel more comfortable around people that are like them rather than being around their family members who may criticize them or talk about them all the time. And that's a whole nother deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So they are just they want to be around other people who have mental health disorders because their
It makes
family
them feel
make them,
normal.
right, it makes them
Hmm.
feel normal. Their family may be making them feel isolated.
Hmm. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
we got to do better.
We do. We do. We have to continue to make sure that we are bringing the awareness that we need to mental health, especially in the areas that need it to most. And I'm not saying it because I'm a black man, but I'm saying it because I'm a black man, because I do understand how mental health affects different people culturally. I'm very culturally competent. I can sit down and do therapy with just about any nationality, because when I was on the site on the behavioral health unit, I've had people from India come in there. I've had, rich white people. I've had, poor black people. I've had black people that have had money. And I'll tell you, it's different demographics look at mental health differently. Different ethnic backgrounds look at mental health differently. When you have someone that might come in there that's of Arab descent, you know, if that happens, then they're going to be very reluctant to receive mental health help, because in their culture, if they're experiencing any mental health issues, then that means that they're not close enough to Allah. It doesn't mean that something's going on. So there are a lot of collectivist societies, like in Asia. They don't really believe in. I'm not going to say they don't believe in mental health. That would be a misquote. But what I'm going to say is they lean more toward family than
Mhm.
outsourcing to a doctor when it comes to mental health. Because in collectivist societies, they really feel like, hey, we're all here for you.
Mhm.
And it's also the taboo behind mental health for a long time. It's embarrassing, especially
Mhm.
for a lot of upper echelon people who have money. You think about back in the days when, if you had a lot of rich people who have people that are suffering from mental health in their family, they hide that. They
Mhm.
hide that from people. They don't want people to know that someone in their family is having mental health issues. We could take it back to the medieval days, to where when people were having mental health issues, they literally drilled holes in their
Now
heads.
that they did do. You want
Yes.
to know what I want to talk about culturally? In some cultures, people associate having a mental health disorder with
Mhm.
being possessed by a demonic spirit.
Yes. And that's, yeah. And some cultures they do. It's more of a timeline than a well. I guess when you talk about
No,
certain
it's out there on the internet right now.
well,
Like
no, well, yeah, when you
the
talk
young
about
people.
certain countries like Haiti, that's an actual thing. Voodoo, it's an actual thing. That's not something like when we think about voodoo, it's kind of like yeah, Halloween, but no, those are things that when people are suffering from mental health, they really do exorcisms and they really do voodoo on people to try to drive the demonic spirits out of them. And so,
So I it's that. So I'm glad you brought up in like in different lands, Haiti and things of that nature. But I
mhm,
was culturally, I was speaking of like the younger generation. Like I
mm,
noticed that people who are what is it, Generation Z?
yes.
Generation Z is really embracing the possibility that mental health is connected to demonic spirits. So I wasn't
Mm.
even talking about what
Wow.
land you're from. I was talking
Wow.
about this
Wow. That
this new
now
age of young
I-
people.
now now I can't speak directly to that, but what I can speak on is the amount of Generation Z patrons that I've seen who they don't believe in anything. When you say, hey, like,
Mm,
I always ask that question, what do you believe in? Is there something out there that you believe in? A lot of them are blank when it comes to that, and they do not believe in any entity, any other entity. And so it leaves the door wide open for whatever it is that they want to practice or however it is they want to feel. It leaves that door open because a lot of times, we when you're raised with certain structures and certain morals and certain values, you're kind of taught, what's right, what's wrong, what's helpful, what's harmful. But when you have certain generations that may isolate themselves,
okay.
certain generations that may depend on one another through social networking.
Okay.
Yeah, think about it. When a kid turns 13, 12, 11, 12, 13, their biggest influence isn't their parents or their brothers and sisters anymore. It's their peers. And
Hmm.
so when we have these, and so when we have these, the ability to talk with our peers without anyone knowing, and you can go in a room and close the door, and you're on the internet all day, fraternizing and communicating with your peers, and you guys are devising different plans or coming up because a lot of times those kids they're trying to find someone who feels like them so they can fit in. And once they
Okay.
find someone online or find something or any entity online to where they can fit in, then it becomes a question as to, you know, um, how am I going to live my life? What rules and set of principles are going to guide me throughout my life at this point? And so when you start, like, when we were young and we started hanging out with gang members and start doing, those are kind of the principles that guided our life because it's like, these people love me. These people will do anything for me. So
Mm.
so in our unknowing minds, so in our immature minds, because as I've said on numerous occasions, the frontal lobes, the part of our brain that controls rational thinking and the rational thought process, isn't fully developed until we're 26 or 27 years old. And so
Yeah.
a lot of times, a young child or a young adolescent or a young teen may think they know and understand. They may think they know, but they don't understand. You can
Hmm.
know a lot of things, but being able to put it in context is something different.
Mm.
So we have to do a better job also as parents, with being more proactive when it comes to our kids, because I have young kids and my daughters, and I've also gone through certain stages where people have had to call me and be like, hey, I don't have social media outlets like that, but I will because I'm trying to get myself together and build a brand, and I'm gonna end up advertising a lot of my counseling things on there, but you know people will call me and say, "Hey, man, is everything all right?" And I'll be like, "What are you talking about?" Be like, well, your daughter posted on Facebook, nobody loves her, and this, and I'm like, "Wow, is that can't be?" And
Hmm.
so think about how many parents go through that when you're sitting in the home and you're providing tender love and care, and you're doing everything you can to make sure that your children are healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially, only to find out that they got a whole nother set of rules in their head that's governing the way they think, and you have to find out through a third party. So I think we need to do a better job with monitoring this, and I think social media needs to be held accountable a lot of times too, because we do a lot of things on social media, and a lot of people get away with a lot of things on social media that affects people negatively. Not saying all the time,
Yeah, yeah.
but
You know
more
what?
but more times often than not, it's negative because
More
that's
soldiers.
the way of the world. That's the way of the world. That's what's
Keep more
attractive,
soldiers.
you know.
Okay. So before you know what, this is a big, big, big subject. Okay.
Yes,
But
yes.
so we're not going to get it all done. But can you give us three things we should be watching for with the people we care about when it comes to PTSD?
Um, well, one of the things that you should watch out for is aggressive behavior. Okay, aggressive behavior when it comes to PTSD. That's something that's a behavioral aspect of it. Okay, so when you see someone overly aggressive or always irritated, that's something that you should, that's a warning sign.
Okay.
um, mentally, when you have someone that's always frustrated and that's showing a lot of anxiety and that feels like nothing ever goes wrong, when you start hearing people use a lot of absolutes, and that's what I was talking about
Mm,
earlier. People always do this, people never do that.
yeah.
The language like always, never, all the time. Be aware of that. And then third, make sure that you're aware that people are getting the proper rest that they need, because a lot of times, people who suffer from PTSD, they suffer from insomnia. They have nightmares, and a lot of times they wake up in cold sweats and they can't sleep, and they're afraid to go back to sleep because they have these continuous nightmares over and over again. So,
Wow.
so those three things are something that we need to be very aware of, and more times often than not, like I said earlier, don't wait for the crisis situation to become a crisis. Be more proactive. Pay attention to the signs,
Mhm.
and those signs. When it comes to PTSD, if you pay attention to those three signs, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to kind of step in before things get worse and get your loved ones the help they need. And that goes across the board with any other mental health illness too. Just pay attention. Pay attention to body language.
All right. You know what? I'm going to rewatch this for myself so I can make sure that I'm helpful to those around me. Thank you once again, Aaron.
Oh, my pleasure. I appreciate you for having me on. Like I said, once again, happy Veterans Day. Thank you to our soldiers for keeping us safe. Thank you for your service. To my dad and my son, I love you. I appreciate you. And I have more people in my family that served. My cousin Bucci, he served in the Navy. He retired out of the Navy. So thank you for you. I wished him happy Veterans Day earlier. My boy Dennis, he's a Navy veteran. That's my best friend. Happy Veterans Day to you too, and to everybody that I forgot about, well, not forgot about, but didn't mention in this last minute, these last few minutes. Happy Veterans Day, and thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching, guys. I appreciate you. Bye bye for now. And
Bye for now.
right, drop in the chat who your favorite veteran is. Give them a shout out. Love you guys. Bye bye.
Yeah, and ask questions or comments if you want to. I'll go back through and I'll try to answer as many as I can. So if you got any questions or comments, leave a question or comment on the YouTube channel or on Dr. Love's page or whatever, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. But thank you all, and have a good night.
Night, guys. Bye bye.